Hello, guys. It's me, Butterfly Spirit 314. So, guys, today I want to talk about why it is that many women depend on men to make the financial decisions. Now, I don't know how people are going to feel about this, but I feel like when it comes down to it, there are a lot of women who feel more comfortable when men are in the driver's seat handling the financial decisions. And I learned a lot about this when I was reading this book. In fact, I just finished this book called Money, a Memoir by Liz Pearley. And she talked a lot about women and how women deal with finances, pretty much. So, this author, Liz Pearley, when she opens this book, um, the book starts off where basically her and her husband, basically, her husband says that he wants to get a divorce from her. And she's completely caught off guard. She has one child. Her and her child moved to another country to be with her husband. And her husband was there for a job. And her husband had been there, I guess, for maybe a few months. And then her and her son, that she and her husband shared, um, basically, you know, joined them, basically. So it was her husband, her, and her son, or their son, rather. And the author, Miss Pearlie, she was really taken aback when her husband asked for a divorce. And basically, she and her husband, they go their separate ways. She has to take a trip back home to the U.S. and she has her young son with her. Her husband, he's in that other country, um, living and things like that. And her world was pretty much turned upside down, you know. And to make matters worse, her luggage and stuff was on its way over to that other country. And she wouldn't be able to get access to her luggage because it was on its way to the country where her husband was living in on a ship. And so that was kind of shocking because pretty much, she had basically moved away from everything and, you know, left work and went over there to be with her husband. And well, here she was coming back home with her son, um, in tow with her. And now she's a single mother. Um, and she's going to be going through a divorce. And she took the separation pretty hard. And what the separation brought to bear for her was the fact that she needed to take control of her financial future. And it brought to bear the fact that it uncovered the fact for her that she wasn't going to be able to depend on her husband to take care of her financially because she had she had this mentality that she thought, that being married meant that her husband was going to take care of everything, take care of her, take care of her son. And she took comfort in that because it sort of, took the pressure off of her, you know, and really that comfort was really something that, she thought, was good, but really it just really masked a lot of insecurities that she had about money. So one of the things I will say, that the Money, a Memoir book really taught me a lot about is I believe it's true that when women are, forced to step up financially, whether they're going through a divorce, whether they're going through a breakup, whether they're going through anything, you know, stepping up and dealing with your finances, even if you're a woman where, where you've been in jobs where you make money and stuff like that, you know, there is a certain level of comfort in being with a man and letting him make those decisions because, you know, as women, we may not feel comfortable, dealing with, investments and stuff, and we may just want to focus ourselves on other things, rather than getting in touch with our finances. And I can personally talk about the fact that for me, um, going through a breakup for me was something where I had to get be more realistic and get back in check about what I needed to do financially. And it really woke me up to the fact that I did let some things kind of slide, and things after I lost my job and stuff like that. And I was no longer the breadwinner. So it really brought to bear some things for me. Um, but I also found strength in it too, because I think that it helped me to remember the fact that I am capable of making financial decisions. Even if I'm not working, I can still, bring things together, to make things happen financially, you know. So I think money and memoir for me, I can basically say myself that, yeah, as women we do get woken up when, we have to stand on our own, and the thing is women, I think it's hard for us to really step into um, dealing with finances, like investing and uh, dealing with, a retirement fund and different other financial stuff like buying a house and different other stuff. It's hard for us to deal with that because when men are little boys, from the time little boys are raised, nobody is going to be telling a little boy, okay, well, when you grow up, somebody's going to take care of you. You know, boys are told, you better get your ass out there because nobody's going to take care of you. And you're going to have to get you a job because, you're not coming back home and you're not, nobody's going to be taking care of you. It's you fail, it's on you, you know, and boys, they're, given that tough love when they're younger, that they're going to have to get out there and they're going to have to work, you know, and they're going to have to do that, and that nobody's going to take care of them. For little girls, when we are raised, a lot of us are told that, oh, focus on your beauty, you know, when you're, an adult, we're told focus on being beautiful because, if we get married, we'll be taken care of. And truthfully, a lot of women, fall into that, because little girls are not told, okay, you need to get out there and work, provide for yourself. No, little boys are told that. Little girls are told, once you get married, when you grow up, you need to get married, have kids. That's what you need to do, you know. And for many women, they take comfort in that and stuff. And there's women out there today that are focusing so much on, being beautiful. The more beautiful I am, the more men I can attract, and then of the men I can attract, then I can, get married. And a lot of women ascribe, so much, preface on beauty, so that they can have, their top pick of a man, because the more beautiful they are, the more they hope that they can find a man that has a lot of money that's going to be able to take care of them and take care of their needs and things like that, you know? So, and they hope that they'll never have to work again. I mean, you have women who are, housewives and stuff like that, you know, and they just want that mentality. That's why you have a lot of women wave it around, having a ring on my finger. Yeah, baby, I'm married, blah, 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 because they're parading around the fact that, look at me, I'm not going to have to, I'm not going to have to make all these decisions and stuff because I can have my husband to do all that stuff or whatever. And the thing is, when it comes down to it, women have to understand that men and women don't see money the same way. You know, Men see money as power. The more money a man has, right, the more powerful he feels. That's a thing for a man. That's power. The more money he has, you know, if a man doesn't have money, he feels like he's not worth it. It hurts his self-esteem because he can't provide. Okay. And so for a man, his very being stems from being able to provide. And he feels like if he's able to provide, he can attract a mate, a woman that is going to be able to, that he feels it could be a good match for him. You have some men who they may, build themselves up and then get a woman that, physically looks good to match how much money they make. You know what I mean? And so, for a man, it's about trying to amass that power. Now, with women, a lot of us, we don't focus on money in that fashion. As women, we're not comfortable talking about money. We ain't comfortable talking about, oh, I make this amount of money or that amount of money. We don't go talking to our girlfriends about how much money we make or whatever. Us as women, we're more focused on relationships and building and maintaining that, because when we were raised up as little girls, we're doing what we saw our mom, our aunts, our grandmothers do. Like, all the women in our family do, we're doing those same things. That's what we're doing. We are actually going and we are focusing ourselves on building those relationships, sacrificing ourselves and our needs and things like that for the expense of other people, because we feel that those relationships matter more. But what we're not taught about is how important it is for us to get out there and learn how to make that money. A lot of times, when you have a woman that is about her money and a woman who talks about money, a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, this woman's a gold digger because she's talking about money and there's something wrong with that. Well, here's the thing. Is it really something wrong for a woman to know how much money it's going to take for her to be able to afford the lifestyle that she has? Because many women, once they find themselves by themselves alone, out of a relationship, whether they went through a breakup or divorce, at that juncture, a woman has to figure out how she's going to support herself. And she can't continue to live like she did when she was, living with a man, whether she was married to him or whether, she was in a relationship with him. She can't do that. Once that, separation happens, the woman's on her own. And so what a woman has to do is she has to find a new normal financially, and that's what she's got to do. And she can't be over here, having champagne and caviar taste on a shoestring budget. Like, she can't be doing that, you know. And so the thing is that, as women, women can be looked down upon when they're thinking about their money and thinking about how much it's going to take for them to live this certain type of life or whatever. And so the thing is that knowing how much money you need to support your lifestyle, ladies, it's important. You have to be able to live, and this factors into the job you have too, right? You have to have a job where you're going to need to be able to pay your rent payment or your mortgage payment, where you're going to be able to afford to pay your bills, like your rent, your gas, your sewer, electric, um, you know, heat, cell phone, where you can afford to get food, is to put food in your fridge, where you can be able to afford for car repairs. If you need to buy a car, you need to be able to, send, assign money to that, any car repairs, any car insurance payments, ladies, we got to be serious about, how much money we're really going to need to be able to survive. And, if we you know, get so used to being wrapped up in a relationship and being like, oh, okay, well, and when I say wrapped up, I mean that if we get so used to where we live with a man and stuff like that, and you get so used to living in a two income household and stuff, and you get so used to that, when a breakup happens and you no longer have that other income available to you, yes, it's going to come as a shock, you know. And so the thing is that it's important for us as women to really, don't give up on our financial, like our sense of dealing with finances. Don't completely give everything over to a man to figure out for you. Have a good sense of what's going on. I work in a job where basically I deal with customers, and many of the female customers I talk to, a lot of times their husbands will be managing different things, financially and stuff like that. And the wife may not get involved to deal with anything financially until, let's say, her husband dies. And then once he dies, for example, then all of a sudden she's thrown into this world of having to manage these finances and stuff. And she's just like, a fish out of water, you know. So the thing is that, ladies, it's important for us to be vested in our financial future. It's important for us to know, how much money is enough. A lot of us are willing to work in jobs, where we're underpaid and stuff like that, and where we're just kind of sitting there by the wayside. We're just kind of being agreeable and stuff like that. And, we're being a good little nice woman where, we always say yes and stuff like that, but we're not thinking financially about ourselves and what it is that we need financially. And I could take a page out of that book myself, because, I think I could definitely, and I have things to learn about that. But yeah, we as women, we get comfortable in a job. We'll get comfortable. We may not necessarily move on or move forward, into a job or go for a promotion or anything, or, we won't ask for a raise or do any of that stuff, because for many of us, it's about, oh, it's about being the nice girl, being good on the job. But being good on the job don't mean they're gonna keep you, and being good on the job don't mean that's gonna be able to pay your bills. You know what I'm saying? If you're working and you're putting in that time and effort, you should be able to, have the paycheck to be compensated for that. And many of us are afraid to ask for that. Many of us will tolerate a lot of stuff on jobs because we're trying to be pleasing on the job. You know, we're trying not to make things difficult. We're trying not to rock the boat, different things. You know what I'm saying? So in reality, as women, you know, we have to get comfortable with not being pleasing, not just sitting there and being like, oh, I'm gonna sit in this job or whatever. We got to get serious about knowing what our worth is. And the difference between men and women when it comes down to money is the fact that when it comes to a man is going to ask for how much money he feels he deserves on a job, whereas a woman is not going to ask for that. Because, like I said, as women, we want to be good little women. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to we don't want people to think we're money hungry like a gold digger. We don't want that. And think about it. When people talk about a gold digger, people are like, oh, well, she's a gold digger. Well, here's the thing. When when a young boy is growing up and he starts, let's say he's cutting grass and making money and stuff, you have people who are going to apply that boy and say, oh, look at him. He's a young businessman. He's going places. When a little girl is, let's say a little girl is starting a business, a lemonade stand or whatever, nobody applies a little girl for, starting a business and stuff like that and making money. but they'll all do that for a little boy, right? So the thing that I'm trying to say here is that as women, we've been put as a disadvantage when it comes to money. And the reason is because we're put at that disadvantage because so much emphasis is put on us, being taken care of, you know, and society tells us, oh, all you got to do is get married. And, so many women put so much into focusing on beauty and stuff just to get married and stuff. And they think, oh, okay, all I got to do is get married. But what about when you don't stay married? What about when the relationship's over? Then what do you do? You know what I mean? So I think in this book, Money and Memoir, I really think Liz Pearley really brings up a lot of situations, talking about how we are as women in the workplace, how we're willing to settle, where she talks about, emotionally, how, we're insecure about money, and we're waiting on somebody else to save us until we can't wait on somebody. And then we just have to kind of step in. And, it can be uncomfortable at first for us to even do that. And I think that, Money and Memoir, there was a book that there was a few quotations in this book from another book that Miss Pearlie had used as a resource that she read, that I'm going to be getting because I believe there's two of them, but I'm going to be getting another book that's going to be on money, relating to money and women and stuff like that too, because I'm really intrigued and I want to learn more. I want to learn more about learn more financially, and I do agree, women and men do look at things differently when it comes down to money. And maybe this is why when I was in a prior relationship, me and my ex bumped heads on money because he was thinking about money in a way that I wasn't thinking about it, you know. And I think that looking back on it, I can kind of see that better now than what I did. And I'm not going to say I was wrong or anything like that, or he was wrong. I'm not going to say anybody was wrong. I think it's really about just being aware and learning more about things too, and where you are. And also, interesting thing that I learned in the book is that a lot of times when we are arguing with a partner, we have a lot of times we'll default to money as being the problem, like, oh, you're spending money on this. We default to that being the problem versus really thinking about the insecurities that we have about money, and maybe we're not even clear about how we feel about money or anything like that, and how we are raised does have a bearing on our perceptions about money, you know. And it's very important for us to really think about that. And a lot of times people argue about money rather than voicing, voicing their true feelings about other things in the relationship that may be going on. People may say, well, you don't make enough money or whatever and stuff. You spend money on this and that, when really they're using that as an out instead of working on insecurities and inner work that they need to do, you know. And for me, I really feel like these books on money is in a way like me doing inner work, a way for me to kind of learn more, understand more, get more comfortable with just opening my mind to new possibilities about money rather than just defaulting to, how, how I thought money should be, or how ideally I think it should go, because like I said, everybody thinks about money differently. Men think about it differently than women. Same thing with going for a promotion. Same thing about taking risk. A lot of times women are not willing to take a risk, whereas a man is willing to take a risk like that. Because why? Because as women, it's not encouraged for us to do that. When we're growing up as little girls, we're taught to, you need to, be a good girl now, whereas a little boy, he's out there going, exploring, doing his thing or whatever. And he's out there doing that because He's taking risk. He's doing what makes sense to him. As little girls, we're not taught to get out there and risk and do stuff. We're taught to basically conform, and things like that. That's what we're really taught a lot about. And I will say something. There was a girl I used to work with at my job. She was let go from the job or whatever because she was a contractor. And I was kind of blown away by how she was younger than me, but I was blown away by how she was so involved, like how she paid a lot of attention to money. Like her mindset was on money. Okay, I need to make this, I need to do this, that. And I'm just like, what? I was looking at her like, surprised. And I had never seen that before. But now I'm starting to understand, and she was younger than me. She has like two kids, two baby babies. I think one of her kids, like one is like, I think one is 2, the other is like 5 years old or whatever. But yeah, like this girl's really about, like, she really, her relationship with money is something where she is realistic as hell about it, and she's just like, she is about those opportunities and doing this and doing that. She's like really about it, when it comes to money. And, like, and I think that's what kind of got me to read another reason I started reading the psychology of money, maybe as a question to kind of think about, like, is there a way I could ever be like that where I can be more comfortable and secure with money? And women who get to that point where they're more secure and their mindset with money is where they're more comfortable with it rather than having insecurity. I think that's interesting. And I think as I learn, maybe I hope to learn to be more, sure of myself and stuff about money. And I haven't really sat down and think about my insecurities about money or anything lately. I really haven't done that, but I think eventually I will. But as you guys can see, I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot in this book, Money, a Memoir. And, really the journey continues with me learning more about money. So I know I said a lot and everything. I appreciate those of you who tune in and watch this video. I hope there's a lot of value that you can get out of this. And if you guys want to, you can read the book, Money, a Memoir by Liz Pearley. Thank you for watching. Bye.